The CEO boss answered a midnight call. "She's dying, sir, and you're the last name she spoke." Richard Harrington's eyes snapped open at the harsh buzzing of his phone against the glass nightstand. The blue glow illuminated his luxurious bedroom suite, casting eerie shadows across the expanse of his king-sized bed. 3:27 in the morning. No good news ever came at this hour. For a moment, he considered letting it go to voicemail, but 20 years of business instinct told him otherwise. CEOs of multinational corporations didn't have the luxury of ignoring midnight calls. "Harrington," he answered, his voice still rough with sleep. "Mr. Harrington, I'm sorry to disturb you." The woman's voice was professional but tinged with unmistakable urgency. "This is Nurse Kendall from Mercy General Hospital." Richard sat up straighter, suddenly alert. His mind raced through possibilities. His parents were both gone, his brother lived overseas but was in perfect health, and his daughter Megan was sleeping safely in her room down the hall. "There's been an accident," the nurse continued. "A woman was brought in about an hour ago. Multiple trauma, internal bleeding. She's in critical condition, sir." "I'm sorry to hear that," Richard said cautiously, "but I don't understand why you're calling me." The pause that followed seemed to stretch into infinity. "She's dying, sir, and you're the last name she spoke." A cold wave washed over Richard, his hand tightening around the phone. "Who is she?" "A woman named Elise Wilson." The name hit him like a physical blow. Richard's free hand clutched at the sheets as memories he'd buried 15 years ago crashed through the carefully constructed walls of his mind. "Mr. Harrington, are you there?" "Yes," he managed. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. He moved on autopilot, pulling on jeans and a sweater in the dark. His thoughts were a chaotic jumble as he scribbled a note for his housekeeper, who would arrive at 6 to prepare breakfast for Megan before school. "Emergency at the office. Please get Megan ready for school. I'll call later." RH. A lie, but a necessary one. How could he explain the truth when he barely understood it himself? Elise Wilson. A name he had forced himself not to think about for a decade and a half. The woman who had once meant everything to him and who he had ultimately betrayed in the worst possible way. The drive to Mercy General passed in a blur. Richard's hands gripped the steering wheel of his Aston Martin so tightly, his knuckles turned white. The late October rain pelted against the windshield, and occasional lightning illuminated the deserted streets of the city he now effectively owned. 15 years ago, Richard had been an ambitious young executive at Apex Industries, a mid-sized tech company with potential but plagued by mismanagement. Elise had been the brilliant lead software engineer, creative, passionate, and utterly dedicated to her work. Their connection had been immediate and intense, both professionally and personally. Together they had developed Continuum, a revolutionary data integration platform that would eventually become the foundation of Richard's business empire. But that was before the takeover, before the choices that defined his career and shattered whatever had been growing between them. The hospital's emergency entrance was bathed in harsh fluorescent light. Richard parked haphazardly and strode through the automatic doors, his usual commanding presence drawing immediate attention. "I'm Richard Harrington. I received a call about Elise Wilson." The receptionist's eyes widened slightly at his name. He was, after all, one of the city's most prominent citizens and largest philanthropic donors, before she quickly composed herself. "Yes, Mr. Harrington, please follow me." She led him through the maze of corridors to a small private waiting area. A doctor in scrubs approached, her face grave. "Mr. Harrington, I'm Dr. Taylor. Thank you for coming so quickly. How is she?" The words felt strange in his mouth, asking about a woman he hadn't spoken to in 15 years. Critical, but stable for the moment. She was in a car accident, hit by a drunk driver who ran a red light. She has multiple internal injuries and has already undergone emergency surgery. The next 24 hours will be crucial. Richard nodded, absorbing the information. "The nurse said I was the last name she spoke." Dr. Taylor's expression softened slightly. "Yes." "When she was brought in, she was conscious briefly. She asked for you specifically. She said it was important, something about the truth and grace." Grace. Another name from the past, another sharp pain in his chest. "Can I see her?" "Briefly. She's unconscious and will likely remain so for some time. We've induced a medical coma to help her body heal." Richard followed the doctor through more corridors until they reached the ICU. Through the glass he could see Elise, surrounded by machines, tubes, and monitors. Her face was badly bruised, partially covered by an oxygen mask. She looked small and broken, nothing like the vibrant, fierce woman who had once challenged him at every turn and made him a better man in the process. "What are her chances?" he asked quietly. "It's too early to say definitively. The next 24 to 48 hours are critical." Richard nodded, his throat tight. "I'd like to stay." "Of course, I'll have someone bring you some coffee." After the doctor left, Richard entered the room and sank into the chair beside Elise's bed. He stared at her battered face, trying to reconcile this broken woman with the Elise he had known. Brilliant, passionate, with a laugh that could illuminate an entire room. The steady beeping of the heart monitor filled the silence as Richard's mind whirled with questions. Why had Elise asked for him after all this time? What truth was she referring to? And Grace, was it possible she meant their Grace? As dawn broke, casting pale light through the hospital window, Richard remained at Elise's bedside, his thoughts a turbulent sea of memories, regrets, and questions. His phone had buzzed several times, messages from his executive assistant, his board chair, even one from Megan asking why he wasn't at breakfast. He replied only to his daughter, reassuring her that everything was fine and that he'd see her that evening. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. A nurse entered, different from the one who had called. "Mr. Harrington, there's someone asking to see Ms. Wilson. A young woman named Amelia Parker. She says she's Ms. Wilson's assistant." Richard hesitated. He didn't recognize the name, but then why would he? 15 years had passed. Elise had built a life he knew nothing about. "Send her in," he decided. Moments later, a young woman with coppery hair pulled back in a severe bun entered the room. She stopped short when she saw Richard, her eyes widening in recognition. "You're Richard Harrington," she stated, her tone accusatory rather than impressed. "I am. And you're Elise's assistant?" "Yes. She's my boss at Solstice Innovations." Amelia's gaze shifted to Elise's still form, and her professional composure cracked. "The hospital called me as her emergency contact. They said she asked for you before they put her under. I don't understand why she would do that." The bitterness in the young woman's voice was unmistakable. Richard raised an eyebrow. "You know who I am in relation to Elise. Everyone at Solstice knows the story, Mr. Harrington. How you stole her technology and pushed her out of Apex 15 years ago. How you built Harrington Tech on the foundation of her work while she had to start over from nothing." Richard felt the familiar weight of guilt, heavier now in this sterile room with Elise fighting for her life just feet away. The official history of Harrington Tech made no mention of Elise Wilson. The world believed Continuum was solely his creation, the breakthrough that had transformed him from ambitious executive to tech visionary. Only a handful of people knew the truth, or at least parts of it. "The situation was more complicated than that," Richard said quietly. Amelia's eyes narrowed. "Complicated enough that she never speaks your name? That the mere mention of Harrington Tech in meetings makes her go completely silent? Whatever happened between you two, it destroyed something in her." Before Richard could respond, his phone buzzed again. His daughter. With a silent apology to Elise, he stepped out of the room to take the call. "Dad, what's going on?" "Mrs. Brian said you had an emergency at the office, but Janie said her dad told her there was an accident and you're at the hospital. Are you okay?" Richard closed his eyes. News traveled fast in their social circle, even at 7 in the morning. "I'm fine, sweetheart. An old colleague was in an accident. I'm just making sure everything's being handled properly." "Is it someone I know?" The innocent question sent a tremor through Richard. "No, Megan. Someone from a long time ago." As he ended the call with his daughter, promising again to be home for dinner, Richard couldn't help but wonder how much longer he could keep the past separated from his present. With Elise lying critically injured and her assistant clearly hostile toward him, the carefully constructed narrative of his life seemed suddenly fragile. Whatever truth Elise wanted to reveal, whatever she meant by mentioning Grace, Richard knew one thing with absolute certainty. His world was about to change irrevocably. Richard returned to Elise's room to find Amelia sitting at her bedside, her posture rigid with tension. The morning sun now fully illuminated the sterile space, casting everything in harsh clarity. The machines keeping Elise alive, the dark circles under Amelia's eyes, and the unmistakable hostility in her gaze as she looked up at him. You should go, Mr. Harrington, Amelia said quietly. I'll stay with her. I can't do that. Richard moved to the opposite side of the bed, studying Elise's face. Despite the bruises and tubes, he could see the woman he had known. 15 years had added fine lines around her eyes, and a few strands of silver in her dark hair. But she was still undeniably Elise. Not until I understand why she asked for me, Amelia's eyes narrowed. Perhaps to finally confront you after all these years. Richard met her gaze steadily. There are things you don't know about my history with Elise. I know enough. I know she founded Solstice Innovations from scratch while battling depression. I know she works 18-hour days and has virtually no personal life. I know she flinches whenever your company is mentioned in the news. Amelia leaned forward. And I know that whatever happened between you two nearly destroyed her. The accusation hung in the air between them, neither willing to back down. The tense silence was broken by the arrival of Dr. Taylor, who checked Elise's vitals and made notes on her chart. Any change? Richard asked. Her vitals are stable, which is a good sign. We'll be running more tests throughout the day. The doctor glanced between Richard and Amelia, clearly sensing the tension. Are either of you family? No, they answered simultaneously. I'm her executive assistant, Amelia added. Her emergency contact. She doesn't have family, at least none that she's in contact with. This detail surprised Richard. The Elise he had known had been close to her parents, especially her father. Her parents? He asked. Amelia shrugged. Her father died about 10 years ago. Her mother has Alzheimer's, lives in a facility upstate. Elise visits every Sunday without fail, even though her mother rarely recognizes her anymore. Another weight of guilt settled on Richard's shoulders. He hadn't known about Elise's father, hadn't been there when she lost him. Mr. Harrington, while we have you both here, Dr. Taylor said, did Ms. Wilson ever mention any medical directives, in case decisions need to be made about her care? I have copies of her legal documents at the office, Amelia said. I can have them sent over. That would be helpful, thank you. After the doctor left, Richard checked his watch. 8:30. By now, his absence from the office would be causing speculation. Harrington Tech employed over 20,000 people worldwide, and its CEO didn't simply disappear without explanation. I need to make some calls, he said. I'll be back. In the hospital corridor, Richard called his executive assistant, Barbara, who had been with him since the founding of Harrington Tech. She was one of the few who knew parts of the truth about Elise. Barbara, I need you to clear my schedule for the next few days. Family emergency. Megan. Alarm sharpened her voice. No, Megan's fine. It's Elise Wilson is in the hospital, critical condition. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. I see, Barbara finally responded. And you're with her? Yes, she asked for me specifically. I need to understand why. Another pause. Richard, are you sure this is wise? After all this time, I don't have a choice. And Barbara, I need you to pull everything we have on Solstice Innovations, discreetly. Of course, should I tell the board anything specific? Just that I'm dealing with a personal matter. I'll check in for the Johnson merger call tomorrow. As Richard ended the call, he spotted Amelia leaving Elise's room, phone in hand. She stopped when she saw him. I need to go to the office to get those documents for the doctor, she said stiffly. I suppose you'll be staying. Richard nodded. Amelia, what did Elise tell you about me? About what happened at Apex? She hesitated, studying him. Not much, actually. Just that you were partners developing Continuum, and then suddenly you weren't. She had to sign away her rights to the technology, and you went on to become a billionaire while she started over with nothing. Amelia tilted her head. The details are something of a mystery. She refuses to discuss it. I see. One thing I do know, Amelia added, is that she keeps a locked file in her office labeled Grace Project. No one knows what it contains, and she never speaks of it. Grace. Again, that name. Richard's heart hammered in his chest. Thank you for telling me. Amelia's expression softened slightly. Despite what you might think, I care about Elise. She saved my career when no one else would give me a chance. If there's something in her past, your past together, that's important enough for her to ask for you while dying, then I want to understand it too. After Amelia left, Richard returned to Elise's bedside. Alone with her for the first time in 15 years, memories flooded back. Her brilliant mind, her infectious enthusiasm when solving a particularly challenging problem, the way she'd unconsciously tuck her hair behind her ear when concentrating. And then, the darker memories. The corporate takeover, the ultimatum from Marcus Bennett, the impossible choice Richard had faced, and the look of absolute betrayal in Elise's eyes when he'd chosen his ambition over her, over them. "Why now, Elise?" he whispered to her still form. "After all this time, why reach out now?" The steady beeping of the monitors was his only answer. Hours passed. Richard worked remotely from his tablet, postponing meetings and reviewing quarterly projections, all while his mind churned with questions about the past and what Elise might know about Grace. Shortly after noon, Barbara called with information about Solstice Innovations. "It's a privately held company specializing in secure database architecture," she reported. "Annual revenue around 40 million. Respectable but tiny compared to us. They've developed a reputation for ethical data handling practices and have a loyal client base in healthcare and education. Any financial troubles, potential buyout targets? Not that I can see. They're stable with consistent growth. Elise Wilson is listed as founder and CEO with a controlling interest. And no mention of any project called Grace. Nothing in public records. Should I dig deeper?" Richard hesitated. "No, not yet." As he ended the call, Dr. Taylor returned with news. "We've completed additional scans. The swelling in her brain has begun to subside, which is an excellent sign. If this continues, we'll consider bringing her out of the induced coma tomorrow." Relief washed over Richard. "So she's going to recover?" "Barring complications, her prognosis is improving." "She's a fighter." "That she is," Richard murmured. When Amelia returned with Elise's legal documents, she found Richard still at Elise's bedside, lost in thought. "You're still here," she observed, surprise evident in her voice. "I told you I would be." Amelia handed the medical directives to a nurse, then sat across from Richard. "I brought something else," she said, placing a small thumb drive on the side table. "I found this in Elise's office safe, in the file marked Grace Project. I've never seen it before, never even knew the safe existed until today." Richard stared at the thumb drive. "You're giving this to me. I don't know what's on it, but I think it's what she would want, given that she asked for you." Amelia's expression hardened. "Whatever history you two share, she's my mentor and the best boss I've ever had. If anything happens to her, I understand," Richard interjected. "And I appreciate your trust. I don't trust you, Mr. Harrington. But I trust Elise's judgment, even when she's barely conscious." Richard pocketed the thumb drive, the weight of it seemingly disproportionate to its size. Whatever information it contained, Elise had kept it secure and separate from her regular work. The implications were both intriguing and terrifying. As evening approached, Richard reluctantly prepared to leave. He had promised Megan he would be home for dinner, and he wouldn't break that promise. His daughter had already lost her mother. He refused to become an absent father as well. "Will you be back?" Amelia asked as they both prepared to depart. "First thing tomorrow," Richard confirmed. "If there's any change, I'll call you," she promised, surprising him with the lack of hostility in her voice. At home, Richard maintained a facade of normalcy through dinner with Megan, discussing her day at school and her upcoming debate tournament. At 16, Megan was remarkably perceptive, so much like her mother in her intelligence and determination. Several times, she gave him questioning looks but didn't press when he deflected her concerns about his work emergency. After Megan retired to her room to study, Richard retreated to his home office, the thumb drive burning a hole in his pocket. Whatever was on it, he needed to know before Elise regained consciousness. The drive was encrypted, requiring a password. Richard tried various combinations. Elise's birthday, the date continuum was first conceived, even the name Grace, all unsuccessfully. Finally, on a hunch, he tried the date everything had fallen apart, June 17th, 2010. The drive unlocked. A single folder appeared, labeled simply Truth. Inside was a document titled, "For Richard, if something happens to me," and a subfolder named Grace Evidence. Richard's hand trembled as he clicked on the document. The first line froze the blood in his veins. "Richard, if you're reading this, I'm either dead or incapacitated. What you're about to learn will change everything you think you know about what happened 15 years ago. More importantly, it will change everything you know about Grace, the name of their stillborn daughter." Richard stared at the screen, his heart hammering against his ribs. Grace, their daughter. or so he had believed, who had never taken a breath in this world. The devastating loss that had driven the final wedge between him and Elise, even before the corporate betrayal that followed. With shaking hands, he continued reading. What Marcus Bennett told you about Grace wasn't true. The story about complications during delivery, about her being stillborn, it was all fabricated. I didn't discover the truth until years later, and by then, you had become untouchable. Harrington Tech was a global powerhouse, and I was still rebuilding my life from the ashes. Richard's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't possible. He'd seen the death certificate, had stood beside Elise at the tiny grave in the cemetery. They had both been devastated, their relationship already strained by the pressures of the Apex takeover negotiations. You need to examine the evidence in the attached folder. DNA tests, hospital records I've managed to obtain, financial transactions. It took me years to piece it all together, but the conclusion is undeniable. Grace didn't die that day, Richard. Bennett arranged for her to be taken and placed with an adoptive family. Our daughter is alive. Jesus Christ, Richard whispered, the room suddenly spinning around him. He gripped the edge of his desk, trying to steady himself. It couldn't be true. And yet, why would Elise lie about something so monumental? Marcus Bennett had been the CEO of Centaur Capital, the investment firm that had orchestrated the hostile takeover of Apex Industries. He had been ruthless, manipulative, and determined to acquire the Continuum technology at any cost. He had also been the one to bring Richard the news about Grace's death, while Elise was still sedated after the traumatic delivery. With trembling fingers, Richard opened the Grace evidence folder. Inside were scanned documents, spreadsheets of financial transactions, and several surveillance photos. He spent the next hour meticulously reviewing everything, his executive mind cataloguing the evidence, while his heart threatened to burst from the implications. Hospital records showed a healthy delivery, contradicting the stillbirth story. Financial records revealed a $2 million payment to the head obstetrician who had overseen Elise's delivery. Most damning of all were the adoption papers, filed 3 days after Grace's supposed death, for a baby girl born on the exact same date. The pieces fit together with horrifying clarity. Bennett had wanted complete control of Continuum, but both Richard and Elise held crucial patents. By separating them, using their daughter as leverage, he had isolated Richard, making him vulnerable to the manipulative offer that followed. Sign over Elise's portion of the rights to Continuum in exchange for Richard retaining his own stake and a leadership position in the new company. At the time, grief-stricken and believing Elise blamed him for the stress that had supposedly contributed to their daughter's death, Richard had made the decision that would define the rest of his life. He had betrayed the woman he loved, rationalizing that the technology they had created together would at least survive and thrive under his guidance. Now, 15 years later, he discovered it had all been built on a foundation of lies. But one critical question remained unanswered. Where was Grace now? Richard scrolled further through the document. I've traced her to a family in Seattle. James and Margaret Winters adopted her as an infant and named her Sophia. She's 15 now, Richard. Our daughter is 15 years old, healthy and thriving according to my sources. I've included recent photos, but I've never approached her or the Winters family. That decision needs to involve you. Attached were several photographs of a teenage girl with dark hair and a familiar smile. Elise's smile, but her eyes. Those were unmistakably Richard's eyes. The resemblance to Megan, her half-sister, was striking. Richard sat back, overwhelmed. Grace, Sophia, was alive. He had another daughter he had never known, growing up just a few hours away by plane, and Elise had discovered this earth-shattering truth, but hadn't contacted him until now, on what might have been her deathbed. The document continued. I've debated for years whether to tell you. After what happened at Apex, after you chose Bennett and your ambitions over us, I wanted to hate you forever. But hatred is exhausting, Richard. And our daughter deserves to know the truth about where she came from, when the time is right. Recently, I've received concerning information that Bennett may know I've uncovered the truth. My home was broken into last month, though nothing obvious was taken. My office computer was remotely accessed despite our security protocols. I fear he may take action to ensure this secret remains buried. If something happens to me, it won't be an accident. Bennett has too much to lose if this comes to light. His reputation, possibly his freedom. The statute of limitations hasn't expired on kidnapping. Richard checked the date on the document. It had been updated just 3 days ago. The car accident suddenly took on a sinister dimension. Was it truly a drunk driver or something more calculated? His phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. Amelia's name flashed on the screen. "Has something changed?" he asked immediately. "No, she's stable," Amelia assured him. "But there's a man here asking questions about Elise. He says he's from Centaur Capital's legal department." Richard's blood ran cold. "What's his name?" "David Lynch. Do you know him?" "He's Bennett's personal attorney." Richard's mind raced. "Don't tell him anything. I'm on my way back to the hospital. Mr. Harrington, it's almost midnight. This can't wait. And Amelia, be careful. We may be dealing with something far more dangerous than a car accident." 30 minutes later, Richard strode through the hospital entrance, his face set in the hard expression that had earned him the nickname the Steel CEO in business circles. He had left a note for Megan and his housekeeper, explaining another emergency had arisen. He found Amelia outside Elise's room, looking tense. "Lynch left about 10 minutes ago. He wanted to know if Elise had regained consciousness and if she had spoken to anyone before the accident." "What did you tell him?" "Nothing specific. I said I'd only arrived after she was already in a coma." Amelia studied his face. "What's happening? You look like you've seen a ghost." Richard hesitated, weighing how much to share. "The thumb drive contained some disturbing information about Marcus Bennett, information that would ruin him if it became public. I believe Elise's accident may not have been an accident at all." Amelia's eyes widened. "Are you saying someone tried to kill her?" "It's a possibility we need to consider. Bennett is a powerful man with resources at his disposal." "Shouldn't we go to the police?" "Not yet. We need more concrete evidence." Richard glanced toward Elise's room. "Any change in her condition?" "The nurses said her latest readings show improvement. They're optimistic about bringing her out of the coma tomorrow." Relief flooded through Richard, immediately followed by apprehension. If Bennett's people were already sniffing around, Elise would be in danger the moment she regained consciousness. "We need to arrange private security," he decided, "and we need to move her to a different room, preferably under a different name." To her credit, Amelia didn't question his judgment. "I'll speak to the hospital administration. Your name carries enough weight to make it happen quickly." While Amelia handled the logistics, Richard sat at Elise's bedside, studying her face in the dim light. The machines continued their rhythmic beeping, the only sound in the quiet room. "I know about Grace," he whispered, taking Elise's hand gently. "I know what Bennett did to us, to our family. I'm so sorry I didn't trust you, didn't fight for you both." His throat tightened with emotion. 15 years of built-up regret, anger, and loss threatened to overwhelm him. He had constructed his life around the narrative that Elise had pushed him away after Grace's death, that he had made the only choice available to salvage their work. The truth was far more painful. He had been manipulated by a master strategist who had identified his ambition as his greatest weakness. By morning, they had successfully moved Elise to a secure private room under the name Elizabeth Warren, with 2 security guards from Harrington Tech's executive protection team stationed outside. Richard had called Barbara again, instructing her to gather everything they had on Marcus Bennett's current activities and whereabouts. As dawn broke, Dr. Taylor arrived to examine Elise. "Her condition has improved significantly overnight. We'll begin the process of bringing her out of the coma this morning. It may take several hours for her to regain consciousness. I'll be here," Richard assured her. When the doctor left, Amelia returned with coffee for both of them. She looked exhausted, but determined. "I did some digging last night," she said, settling into a chair. 2 months ago, Elise met with a private investigator. She didn't tell me why, but she seemed anxious afterward. Then last week, she updated her will and gave me specific instructions about secure files in her home office if anything happened to her. Did she mention the name Grace or Sophia?" Amelia shook her head. "No. But she did say something odd. She said, 'Sometimes family finds you when you least expect it.' I didn't understand what she meant at the time." Richard's phone buzzed with a message from Barbara. "Bennett flying in from NYC this morning. Scheduled meeting at Centaur offices at 11 a.m. Bennett was coming to town. The same day Elise was expected to regain consciousness. The timing couldn't be coincidental. "We need to prepare for what happens when she wakes up," Richard said grimly. "Bennett won't stop at one attempt if he believes his secret is in jeopardy." "What secret could possibly be worth killing for?" Amelia asked. Richard met her gaze steadily. "The kind that would destroy a man's legacy and possibly send him to prison for decades." As he spoke, Elise's fingers twitched in his hand. The first voluntary movement since the accident. Both Richard and Amelia froze, watching intently as her eyelids began to flutter. After 15 years of separation built on lies and manipulation, Richard was about to face the woman whose life he had inadvertently helped destroy, and together they would need to protect the daughter neither of them had been allowed to know. Elise's eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening as awareness returned. Her gaze drifted around the unfamiliar room before settling on Richard's face. For a moment there was no recognition, just confusion. Then her eyes widened. "Richard?" Her voice was barely audible, rough from disuse and the intubation tube that had been removed earlier. "I'm here, Elise." He leaned closer, still holding her hand. "You're in the hospital. There was an accident." She closed her eyes briefly, as if processing this information. When she opened them again, urgency filled her expression. "Grace," she whispered, "did you—" "I found the drive," Richard confirmed quietly. "I know everything." Relief washed over her features, immediately followed by alarm. "Bennett is flying in today. We've moved you to a secure room under a different name. There are guards outside." Amelia stepped forward, tears of relief glistening in her eyes. "Elise, thank God you're awake." Elise's gaze shifted to her assistant, a weak smile forming. "Amelia, always so efficient." "I'll get the doctor," Amelia said, squeezing Elise's hand before stepping out. Alone with Richard, Elise struggled to form words, her throat dry and raw. He helped her sip water through a straw, supporting her head gently. "How long have you been here?" she asked. "Since they called me, the night of the accident." A shadow crossed her face. "Not an accident. Car forced off the road, black SUV." Richard's jaw tightened, confirmation of what he had already suspected. "We'll need to report this to the police." "Evidence first," Elise insisted. "My apartment, safe behind the bookcase. Code is Grace's birthday." Richard nodded, understanding immediately. April 22nd, 2010, a date etched permanently in both their memories. Dr. Taylor entered with Amelia, cutting short their conversation. After examining Elise and expressing satisfaction with her progress, the doctor cautioned that she needed rest and limited excitement. 1 hour of visiting time. Then she needs to rest, she instructed before leaving. Elise waited until the door closed. "Richard, you need to understand, I only discovered the truth 3 years ago. Private investigator specializes in adoption fraud." "Why didn't you come to me immediately?" The question that had been burning in his mind since reading her document. Pain flickered across her features. "Would you have believed me? After everything, the way we ended?" She took a labored breath. "Bennett had convinced you I was unstable, grieving mother, imagining conspiracies." The accusation stung because it contained truth. In the aftermath of Grace's supposed death and the Apex takeover, Bennett had indeed planted seeds, suggesting Elise's judgment was compromised by grief and stress. "I would have listened," Richard insisted, though uncertainty colored his tone. "Perhaps," Elise conceded, "but I needed proof first. Incontrovertible evidence. And now you have it. Yes, financial records, witness testimonies, DNA confirmation." She gripped his hand with surprising strength. "Our daughter is alive, Richard. She's been living 20 minutes from your corporate headquarters." The revelation struck him anew. "The Winters family. Have you made contact?" Elise shook her head slightly. "Observed from distance only. They're good people. Sophia is thriving. Honor student. Plays violin." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Like you used to." Richard's throat constricted with emotion. He had abandoned the violin when his career took off, one of many personal interests sacrificed on the altar of success. "What's the plan now?" he asked. "Bennett knows you've uncovered the truth." "Evidence package with my lawyer," Elise explained. "Instructions to release to FBI if anything happens to me. But I needed you to know first." "Why now, after all these years?" Elise's eyes grew distant. "Sophia turned 15 last month. Same age I was when my father taught me truth always matters, no matter the cost." Her voice strengthened. "She deserves to know where she came from, and you deserve to know your daughter lives." The door opened and Amelia returned, her expression tense. "Mr. Harrington, there's a call for you at the nurse's station. Your executive assistant says it's urgent." Richard reluctantly left Elise's side, following Amelia to the desk where he accepted the phone. "Barbara? Richard, Bennett's people are looking for you. They've been to your office and your home." "Megan called me. Someone claimed to be from your security team tried to question her about your whereabouts." Ice formed in Richard's veins. "Is she safe?" "Yes. Your regular security recognized the imposters. They've moved her to the lake house as a precaution." "Good. Keep her there until I say otherwise." Richard's mind raced. Bennett's getting desperate. He knows Elise survived and that I'm with her. "What do you want me to do?" Richard made a split-second decision. "Activate Protocol Fortress for my family. And Barbara, contact Diane Porter at the FBI. Tell her I have evidence of kidnapping, fraud, and attempted murder involving Marcus Bennett. She'll understand the significance." Diane Porter had been investigating Bennett's financial dealings for years, never able to gather enough evidence for charges against the powerful financier. This could be the break she needed. "Consider it done," Barbara confirmed. "And Richard, be careful." Returning to Elise's room, Richard found her sitting more upright, some color returning to her pale cheeks. "Bennett's people tried to get to Megan," he reported grimly. Alarm flashed across Elise's face. "Is she safe?" "Yes, my security team moved her to a secure location." Richard was struck by Elise's immediate concern for a stepdaughter she had never met. "We need to move quickly. Bennett's getting desperate." Elise nodded. "My apartment, the evidence." "I'll go," Amelia volunteered. "I have a key and know where the safe is." Richard shook his head. "Too dangerous. Bennett might have people watching her place." He turned to Elise. "I've contacted the FBI, an agent who's been building a case against Bennett for years." "Porter," Elise said, surprising him. "I've spoken with her. She has copies of some documents, but not everything." A knock at the door silenced them. One of the security guards entered. "Mr. Harrington, hospital security reports a group of men in suits asking about Ms. Wilson at reception. They're claiming to be federal agents but refuse to show identification." Richard's decision was immediate. "We're moving now. Call for transport to Harrington Tower, secure entrance." Within 30 minutes, they had transferred Elise to a wheelchair. Dr. Taylor had objected strenuously, but relented when Richard explained the potential danger, agreeing to sign release papers on the condition that a private medical team would continue Elise's care. As they navigated the hospital's service corridors toward the loading dock, where Richard's security team waited with an armored SUV, Elise reached for his hand. "I never thought we'd be on the same side again," she said quietly. Richard squeezed her fingers gently. "We should never have been on opposite sides. Bennett orchestrated everything. Grace's supposed death, our separation, the way I betrayed you with the continuum rights." "You had a choice," Elise reminded him, though without the bitterness that might have colored such words years earlier. "I did," Richard acknowledged, "and I made the wrong one. I've regretted it every day since." The loading dock doors opened, revealing Richard's head of security, Kevin, with the vehicle. As Amelia helped Elise into the SUV, Kevin approached Richard. "FBI agent Porter is meeting us at Harrington Tower," he reported. "And sir, Ms. Megan is secure and asking for updates." "Tell her I'm safe and we'll call her soon," Richard instructed, climbing into the vehicle beside Elise. As they pulled away from the hospital, Richard's phone buzzed with a message from Barbara. Bennett cancelled his meetings. Private jet filed flight plan back to NYC. Leaving in 30 minutes. "He's running," Richard told the others. "We need to move faster." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. At Harrington Tower, Elise was installed in the secure executive suite with medical personnel, while Richard met with FBI agent Porter, providing her with the evidence from both the thumb drive and additional documents Kevin's team had retrieved from Elise's apartment. By evening, the news was reporting Marcus Bennett's arrest at the private airport as he attempted to flee. The charges included kidnapping, fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. The business world was in shock at the downfall of one of its most prominent figures. In Richard's private office, he and Elise sat together watching the coverage, the weight of 15 years of separation and lies beginning to lift. "What happens now?" Elise asked softly. "With Sophia?" Richard considered the question carefully. "We approach the Winters family together, explain the situation delicately. Sophia's 15, old enough to understand, but young enough that this will be incredibly disruptive. And Megan, how will you explain to her that she has a sister?" "With honesty," Richard said. "She deserves nothing less." Elise studied his face. "You've changed, Richard. Losing you and Grace changed me. Building a life with half my heart missing changed me." He met her gaze directly. "Success means nothing without the people who matter most. It's not going to be simple," Elise cautioned. 15 years is a long time. We're different people now." "I know," Richard reached for her hand, "but for the first time in 15 years, we have a chance to make things right, for ourselves and for our daughters." 3 months later, Richard stood beside Elise on the deck of his lake house, watching as Megan and Sophia sat at the end of the dock, their feet dangling in the water as they talked quietly. The sisters had met for the first time just 6 weeks earlier, after careful preparation and numerous family therapy sessions. The Winters family had been devastated by the revelation, but ultimately concerned with Sophia's well-being. A complex arrangement had emerged. Sophia would maintain her legal relationship with the only parents she had ever known, while gradually building relationships with her biological parents and sister. "They look comfortable together," Elise observed, leaning slightly against Richard's shoulder. "They have the same laugh," Richard noted, "and they both scrunch their nose when they're concentrating." Elise smiled. "Your genetic contribution." As they watched their daughters, Richard reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought them to this moment. Bennett was awaiting trial. Harrington Tech and Solstice Innovations were exploring a partnership that would honor their original vision for Continuum, and most importantly, a family fractured by greed and manipulation was finding its way toward wholeness. "I never expected a second chance," Richard admitted quietly. "Not after what I did." Elise turned to face him. "Sometimes family finds you when you least expect it." The phrase she had shared with Amelia weeks before the accident now took on new meaning. As Richard gazed at the woman he had lost and found again, and at the daughters who were building a bridge between past and future, he understood that some bonds could never truly be broken, only bent and tested until they found their way back to strength. The family that had been stolen from them 15 years ago was different now, shaped by separate lives and experiences, but it was whole in a way that felt both unexpected and inevitable. As Megan and Sophia's laughter drifted up from the dock, Richard and Elise turned toward the sound, moving forward together into a future neither could have imagined when a midnight call had shattered the carefully constructed walls between them.